Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi is Horayos, daf Zayin, Horayos 7. His daf is dedicated for Shemir Fel Chayalim, Matzal Teshviyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, the Seitz Torah. We're going to start on the bottom of Vav Amud Beis as we begin the second chapter of Maseches Horayos. In this chapter, it begins with a discussion of the Kohen HaMashiach. Kohen HaMashiach is a Kohen who was anointed with the special anointing oil. And this person is the Kohen HaMashiach. I'm just going to briefly say that the Kohen HaMashiach is discussed in Sefer Vayikra, Perek Dalet. It says, "In Kohen HaMashiach Yachata Ma'ashmasa," if he will make a sin for the guilt of the people, the kriva chataso asher chata par ben bakar tamim laHashem l'chata. So he has to bring a bull as a sin offering. So that is the law of the power of the Kohen HaMashiach. When the Kohen makes a mistake, he also has to bring a sin offering. So now our Mishnah tells us, Hora Kohen Mashiach ha'atzmo, that let's say the Kohen Mashiach made a mistaken ruling on his own, and then Hori Kohen Mashiach ha'atzmo shogeg va'asa shogeg. So he made the mistaken ruling on his own accidentally, and he did it accidentally. Mevi par. And then he has to bring a bull as an offering. Shogeg va'asa mezid. Let's say he accidentally made the ruling, but he intentionally did the sin, meaning to say by the time he acted, he knew it was wrong, or mezid, or he intentionally made a mistaken ruling. But us a shogeg, but he accidentally did it. He forgot that it was incorrect. Then potter. Then he does not bring the sin offering because those are too close to intentional. So therefore, he doesn't get to be able to bring a sin offering. Sharas Kohen Mashiach Atzmo Kores Bezdin Tzibor. So the Mishnah that the law of when the Kohen Mashiach makes a mistaken ruling, it has to be like the law of the Bezdin making it for the community, just like, and Rashi explains, just like the mistake of the Bezdin for the community, you're only liable if there's a mistaken ruling and a mistaken action. So too the Kohen HaMashiach, that's the same law. So the Gemara says, Shogeg va'asa shogeg may be par, that if he accidentally committed the sin, accidentally made the ruling, and then he accidentally committed the sin, maybe power, he brings a bull. Pshita, that's obvious. That's literally from the pasuk. So why does he need to tell us? So that's the textbook definition. So Amar Abaye Hachamay Eskinan, Abaye says Kigon Shahora v'Shachach me'ezet tam hora. He made a mistaken ruling, but he forgot the basis for his ruling. And when he made the mistake, Amar Hareni Osal Das Hora also. And when he makes the action, when he does the action, he says, I'm doing it on the basis of my ruling, but he forgot the reason. Mao the Tami might have said, since if he would have realized why he made the mistaken ruling, if he had realized the reasoning, Shema Hadarbe, then maybe he would have recanted Kamezidam. He might have thought it's like an intentional sin. And therefore he doesn't bring the accidental sin offering. Mashal, we don't say that. Mezid Vasashog, if he intentionally sinned, intentionally gave a wrong ruling, but he accidentally did the sin, then we say he does not bring a korban. Menon Emilia, what's the source for this idea? The Tan Rabbanan, or Ashmasa Am. It says by the Kohen Mashiach, by the guilt of the people. Hare Mashiach Katzibor. That the Kohen Mashiach has the same halacha as the community, which is not an insignificant point. And you say Valodinu, it's a logical argument. We say Tzibor Valodinu, Tzibor Mutza Mikal Yachid, Umashiach Mutza Mikal Yachid. We say, so the Gemara says, why do we need a pasuk to tell us this? Because we say that the Tzibor, the community, is not part of the individual. Moshiach Mutza Mikal Yachid, and the Kohen Mashiach is not part of the individual. because an individual brings a female sheep or a goat, and the community brings a bull, and so too the Kohen Mashiach brings a bull. It doesn't bring a sheep or a goat. So ma tzibor ein chayavin elam davar shilas ma'aser. So just like the community only brings this communal bull if there's a mistaken ruling and a mistaken action. Af Mashiach yachayev elam davar shilas ma'aser. So to the Kohen Mashiach should only bring it under those circumstances. So why do you need a pasuk? Oh, no, because maybe it's the opposite. Nasi Musa Mikal Yachad. Also, a Nasi, the head of the tribe, is also different from an individual. Mashiach Musa Mikal Yachad. And the Mashiach is different. The Mashiach is also different than an individual. Ma Nasi maybe bish shigas ma'ase below elam davar. Just like the Nasi brings with a mistaken ruling, just like the Nasi Mevi, Bishigas Maisa, below Elam Davar, just like the Nasi brings as a result of a mistaken action, even though there is no mistaken ruling. So I might have thought Af Mashiach, also the Kohen who was anointed, maybe Bishigas Maisa brings by a mistaken action below Elam Davar. So do we compare the Nasi, the Mashiach to the Nasi, in which case he does not require a mistaken ruling in order to bring it, or do we compare him to the community, in which case he does? Narrow me dome. So let's see who it's like. Tzibor b'par, the communal parom davar, it's a shel tzibor, is with a bull. Ve'ein mevi'in asham tali, and also the community does not bring the special carbon where you're not sure if you did this thing called an asham tali. Mashiach, whereas the Kohen Mashiach is also a par. Ve'ein mevi'in asham tali, also is a bull, and he doesn't bring the asham tali. Just like the community is only liable with a mistaken ruling and a mistaken action, so to the Kohen Mashiach. Oh, maybe it's the opposite. Nasi maybe Seira Bavodas Kochavim. A Nasi brings just one goat if he sins with idolatry. Maybe Asham Vada. He also sometimes brings a carbon Asham Vada. Umeshiach maybe Sira Bavodas Kochavim, maybe Asham Vada. And the Nasi and the Mashiach both bring a single animal. It might be the single animal that they both have the single animal that's brought for idolatry, and they also both bring him Asham Vadai. Manasi maybe Bishigas Maisa, Mashiach maybe Bishigas Maisa. So you might think that they both bring only with Shigas Maisa. You don't need a mistaken ruling. Tal Malomar, therefore we need the pasuk Ashmasa Am, by the guilt of the people. So the Gemara says, Harehu Mashiach. So the Gemara says, so what do we learn out from the pasuk that says Ashmas Am, that the Mashiach is Kedet Tzibor. Ma Tzibor Eno Mevi Ela, just like the Tzibor only brings if there's a Elam Davar M'Shigas Maisa. Mashiach Eno Mevi Elam Davar M'Shigas Maisa. Just like the tzibur only brings if there's a mistaken ruling with a mistaken action, so too the anointed Kohen also. Just want to pause for a second and to say that the Kohen Mashiach is the most, you can't imagine, more spiritual leader of the people, and yet we see that he has the same malacha as everybody else, that it's the Shigos Maisa, Helam Davar Shigos Maisa. Mara says, Ema, but maybe you might say, Ma tzibur horav asu achrav Paraso Chayavin. Maybe you'll say, just like the community, it's where the Bezdin makes a mistaken ruling, just like the Bezdin makes a mistaken ruling, and the community follows him, then that's when he is liable. Av Mashiach Kishahora, maybe the Mashiach has to do the mistaken ruling. Vasu Achar, when people have to follow him, maybe that's when he's liable. No, so the pasuk says he brings the sin offering for the sin that he committed. Who may be he's responsible for the sins he makes, but not for the sins that others do. Now let's analyze this. The Kohen Mashiach brings a bull. and he does not bring an Asham Toy. How do we know? On the Imev Asham Toy. How do we know that the Kohen Mashiach does not bring this Asham Toy, which is again the korban we saw 2 days ago that you bring when you're not sure if you committed the sin or not, because it says v'chipro of a Kohen al shigaso asher shagag misha chataso v'shigaso shaveh. So the Kohen brings an atonement for the accidental sin that he did. Somebody whose sin and his accidental are equal. Yatsa Mashiach she'en shigaso v'chataso shaveh. This is different from the Kohen Mashiach because his mistake and his sin are not the same. The Shema Sa'am, because of the pasuk, Shema Sa'am, Areu Mashiach Katzibor Lash Masam. And so that we see from here that the Mashiach is like the Tzibor. So now the Gemara asks the question, Lash Masam. So the Gemara says, how can we say that the Kohen Mashiach is exempt from Asham Torah because it says Lash Masam? And so by saying that he's comparable to the tzibor, that he's not liable for a korban, except why don't we say that he's only liable for a korban when the people follow him? Ad kan lo kamarli. We don't even know this law from Ashmasam because the whole basis of the brisa was that we can learn the Kohen Mashiach from comparing him to a bezdin, even without the pasuk of Ashmasam. So how can the brisa say that the Mashiach is like the tzibor? He doesn't bring a Asham Torah on the base of this pasuk. So the Gemara says, no, Asham Kedei Nas, but when the Brisa brings the law of the Kohen Mashiach and the Asham Torah, it really wasn't meant to be literal. It was only, it was just throwing it in there, but it wasn't precise. And it was just saying that really they have the same law that they both bring a power for a chat. And now up to the next Mishnah. Hora b'fnei atzmo. Hold on 1 second. Hora b'fnei atzmo, v'asa b'fnei atzmo. Let's say the Kohen Mashiach made a ruling on his own, and he followed his own ruling. Mischaper lo b'fnei atzmo. Then he has to bring his own korban, his bull. Hora matzibor v'asa matzibor. But let's say Kohen Mashiach made this ruling at the same time as the tzibor, and he did the same sin at the same time as the tzibor, mischaper lo matzibor. Then he can fulfill his atonement with the communal offering. She'ein bezdin chayav v'nat sheyoru levato mitzvos l'kayim mitzvos. And the Mishnah throws in another law here that the court is only liable when they rule to uproot a portion of the law and to fulfill it. So to the Kohen Mashiach. Also, they're not liable by idolatry unless it's the same law. Unless they rule to nullify part of the mitzvah and uphold part of it. What's the source of this idea? What's the source of this idea that that they rule on the same thing, that the Kohen could be mischaper with the bezin? We have a brisa. I might think if he ruled with the community and he did it with the community, I might think that he brings the bull on his own. V'dinu, and we can make a logical argument. I might think that under these circumstances he brings his own bull, and if he makes a ruling with the community and makes a mistaken action with the community, I might think he brings his own bull, and it's a logical argument. Nasi mutza mikol yachid, Mashiach mutza mikol yachid. He's like the Nasi, the leader of the tribe. That just like the Nasi is not part of an individual, and the Mashiach is not part of the individual. Man Nasi chata b'fnei atzmo, maybe b'fnei atzmo. Just like the Nasi, if he sins on his own, he brings it on his own. Chata matzibor mischaper matzibor. If he sins with the community, he can fulfill his obligation through the community. Af Mashiach, chata b'fnei atzmo, maybe b'fnei atzmo. Chata matzibor mischaper matzibor. So too, I might say that the Mashiach, if he sins on his own, he brings it on his own. If he sins with the community, he is atoned with the community. The Gemara says no. Nasi is different because the Nasi is under one rubric of atonement on Yom Kippur, that the Tzibor achieves atonement. Tomar b'Mashiach, we can't say this by the Kol Mashiach, she'emes chaper u'matzibur b'Yom Kippur. He does not achieve a Tomer with the community on Yom Kippur. He has to bring his own sacrifices. So, and Hol v'emes chaper u'matzibur Yom Kippurim yochel yavi parla atzmo. So since he does not achieve a Tomer with the community on Yom Kippur, I might think he brings a bull for his own by himself. Talmud Omer al chataso asher chata, for the sin that he committed. Okay, tzad chata b'fnei atzmo, maybe b'fnei atzmo. If he sinned on his own, he brings it on his own. Chata matzibor, if he sinned with the community, mischaper lo matzibor, then he has to bring the korban with the community. And the Gemara asked the question, hey chidami, what's the scenario here? How could we even have this situation? Maybe what's the scenario that we're talking about is where the Kohen HaMashiach is the leader of the generation in terms of wisdom, whereas the court is not. And Pshita the Mischaper b'fnei atzman. So it's Pshita. That's obviously the case that the Mischaper b'fnei atzmo, that the Kohen on his own will have to bring his own korban, because the Hora, the Lahon, will come, because their offering, their ruling is nothing, because it has to be done by the leader of the generation. And so therefore, by Yisuye, Kisbo, Sira, Kol Chavachad, then therefore every single individual has to bring an individual offering. And if the court is the one who are experts, but not the Kohen HaMashiach, why does he have to achieve atonement on his own? He wasn't the mufla of the generation, so he doesn't have to bring a offering. So I'm Rav Papa, so on top of Zayin on base, or Papa says, Kigon Shayum Muflin Shneim. So Rav Papa says that both of them were the leaders of the generation. So therefore they were able to do it. Abaye thought to say that when our Mishnah has this scenario, or the Bride says this scenario, that if he sinned on his own, and he did it on his own, that what is that referring to? Hechidami. That they were each sitting in two separate places. The Kamoro betrayed Suri, and they gave a ruling about two separate prohibitions. You think the two places is what caused this to happen? Even if they were sitting in one place, since they gave a ruling about two prohibitions that are different, we call it a sin on its own. So the Gemara says we still want to understand what the exact distinction was. I understand if for sure it's the case if he made the ruling about forbidden fat that it's kosher, and the court ruled about idolatry, we're going to call that chait b'fnei atzmo. We're going to call that two separate sins, the chalukim mitamaya, because they have separate psukim, the chalukim mekarbanos, and they're different offerings. The par, he brings a bull, the par v'sara, and the court brings a bull and a goat. The kamaisu hane seir, because they bring a goat, but he doesn't bring the goat. The kol shekain, and also and for sure, if he makes a ruling on idolatry, and they bring it out about chaylev, the chalukim and karban, that is completely separate offerings. The because he brings a female goat, the inu par, and they bring the bull. Let's say they both give a ruling, but about two different types of chaylev. What will be the law? They both bring the same offering, a bull. Given the matri Dimitri Kraik also, since it comes from two separate psukim apalgina b'tamaya, we say it's separate. We say no, they're both chaylev, and so therefore it's considered the same ruling. And imtim tzolomar shem chaylev echad. If you want to say it's the same chaylev, he gives his ruling about chaylev, and they give it about blood. What will be the case? Mi amrinan b'tamayo Palkinon, or Dilma given the Shem carbon, plus a carbon. Do we say, well, since they have the same carbon, we view them as the same? Or do we say they're separate? So we say Teku. Says the Mishnah, the court is not liable unless they try to uproot a portion of the mitzvah and to keep a portion of the mitzvah. We know, and how do we know this law? How do we know this? We said this in the first chapter. Very rarely does the Gemara refer to something like that, like we said in the earlier chapter. But it says v'nelam davar v'nelam davar mi davar v'lo kol guf, from a portion of it and not the whole thing. Okay, so then the next piece was v'chein Mashiach. The Kohen Mashiach is only liable if he said the same malach. He wants to uproot part and keep part. How do we know this? The Kohen Mashiach is like the community. With the low ba'avodas kochavim, and now like same law like idolatry, even down the Tanur Rabbanan, fishiyat avodas kochavim lidon ba'atzma. Since idolatry is judged by itself, yachayu chayavin al kiras mitzvah kula. I might think you're liable even if you uproot the entire mitzvah. Nemar kameinei and nemar olam meinei. It says the word meinei. Ma'olam bezin, kanami bezin. Just like here, it's with a cord. Also there, it's with a cord. Ma'olam davar v'lo kol guf. Kanami davar v'lo kol guf. It's just a portion of it and not the whole. And not the whole mitzvah. Now we're up to the next Mishnah. Ein chayavin elam davar shigam asmaisa. The Kohen Mashiach and the regular ruling is you're only liable if there's a mistaken ruling with a mistaken action. Kohen Mashiach, also the Kohen Mashiach. V'lo ba'avodas kochavim, and also by idolatry. Ein chayavin elam davar shigam asmaisa. Same halacha. Minalan. What's the source for this idea? That the bezin is only chayev if there's a helam davar shigas ma'aseh, mistaken rule, mistaken action. The Tanur Rabbanan yishku, that it says if in kol das Yisrael yishku, if the entire community will make a mistake, yachayu chayavin al shiga v'nelam. It says yishku yachayu chayavin al shigas ma'aseh. I might think they're liable even if it's just a mistaken action. Tamaomer yishku v'nelam davar ein chayavin elam davar shigas ma'aseh. You're only liable of elam davar shigas ma'aseh. Kohen Mashiach. Also, the Kohen Mashiach is also liable only under the same scenario. How do we know? Right, Mashiach. Kohen Mashiach is like the community. The Tanur Rabbanan, idolatry is judged by itself. I might think they're liable for mistaken action. It says the word name. Just like by regular sin, you're only liable if there's a mistaken rule and a mistaken action. So then the Gemara says, what about V'ilu Mashiach b'avodas kochavim hu katani, whereas the Kohen Mashiach by idolatry is not listed with his halacha. So we're going to get into that, God willing, in tomorrow's daf. Baruch Hashem, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem.